Hello, welcome back to the channel. So this is the LANCIA 1ZM, the German sort of variant, released from Copper State Models in 1/35 scale. Lovely kit. Just taking a little moment to show you through the instructions here. So you've got a little bit of reference there at the front. That's the one we're going to be doing, or one like that. And then we've got quite a lot of schemes in the back here. That's the one I've chosen. It's inspiring the one we make. It's not like for like, and you got quite a lot of schemes there, as you can see. You've got a few Italian ones from Ethiopia, a couple of German ones, and then a couple of camouflaged Italian ones, as well as a Spanish Civil War vehicle. We've got a parts breakdown there, a sprue map as well, and as you go through you can see, I think it's fair to say, these instructions are inspired by Wingnut Wings, and the whole package is really, if you think of Copper State Models as a Wingnut Wings inspired company, but doing, making their own twist on it, but taking some of the best bits and trying to implement some of those into their product. But they also do ground vehicles as well as aircraft. In fact, they do more vehicles than aircraft at the minute, I think. So here we go. This is a First World War armoured car that saw service from the First World War through every single conflict that the Italians had after the First World War to the Second World War, including Ethiopia and the Spanish Civil War, and some, obviously, stuff in their own country as well. And there's a number of variants as well, which Copper State Models do two variants, which the differences are the wheels and fenders, really. And then there is another version that's got a small turret on the top. I don't know if we'll ever see that one, which is quite unusual. Spain seemed to have a mix. There's about 8 or 9 that went there, and they seem to have a mix of all the variants. But the main documented pictured one is of this type. So that's the one we're doing. But as I say, the camouflage is quite complex. So we really just are inspired by the reference. That, there's an awful lot there that isn't photographed, so we're going to be going for one of them. But they all carried this quite unusual painted scheme over the original base green, this kind of painted camouflage. And it's interesting to get a First World War vehicle out of the First World War setting, which always adds a bit more interest to it. Not that the First World War is uninteresting, but it's a nice spin. It makes it stand out a little bit, having something that old still being used. So there we go. Here we are. Right, we're building up the engine block and starting to get some paint on it. And the painting instructions are very good. You can really just follow them, and they're using the paint name rather than a call out of a manufacturer. So I've gone for a bit of semi-gloss black there from Tamiya. Lovely colour that. If you fin it with Mr. Levelling thinners, it goes on lovely. That there is the Tamiya Lacquer Silver, LP11, I think it is. Again, fabulous stuff. Goes on really well and is very hard wearing. And now you can see that it's obviously, if you spray these things up as sub-assemblies, they start to come together quite nicely. And it is quite an impressive little engine. I mean, this was going to be not necessarily a speed build, but I didn't intend it to take as long as it took. I bought this at the beginning of December from Bovington as I was driving past, and I finished it now. Literally, like, the week this video's come out is when I finished it, and it still needs to be put on a base. So that's no fault of the kit. It's just things got in the way. So I'm happy that it's over now, and I'm through the end and actually got it completed, because it's a lovely little piece for the collection, but quite unusual, which is what I like. So for painting up the chassis and really the whole vehicle, apart from the engine paint, it's going to be this filled grey from Tamiya XF75, which I settled on because it's close enough, and that's kind of what you need to be with vehicles. You don't need to be bang on. Close enough is close enough, and then from there you can actually then start to apply different techniques to change the shade if you want to, for a more aesthetic reason rather than being accurate. But it's really this sort of Italian green that the vehicles are painted in. I like it as a base. It looks right, and that's always a good tell. I mean, if it looks right, you know, you get it with sort of panzer grey and things like that, and olive drab. If it looks the part, it's probably okay. You don't need to worry much more after that. I went and got a load of ammo acrylics in different colours so I could brush paint this. It looks a bit ropey, but once it's in you don't see it. And that's just painting up the different parts, which it says you've got brass, copper and this kind of Bakelite leather colour. And once it's all brought together, it's really quite nice. That little propeller blade thing on the front of the fan belt there is painted in the plain wood colour. I do a bit of wood grain on that when the oils start getting in there. But I was reasonably happy with that, and we attached the radiator, and it's looking really quite nice. And then we obviously put that in the vehicle and have one hatch open, so you don't need to be worrying too much about getting it looking perfect, because you're not going to see that much of it. Now we're on to construction. I just wanted to point out I missed this part. There were sort of two options in the instructions, and I was meant to not glue those bits in that I just showed you. And I had to tease them back out again because I did it the night before. So there is a fair old gap behind the machine guns. I can't tell if that's correct or not. Presumably it is. There's no interior to the turret, and you can't see really past the machine guns anyway, so it's not something to worry about. You know, I think it's pretty good. I must say, because I've done a video with them and I just mentioned it, I bought this from the Tank Museum. It's my kit. I bought this. I just chose to buy it from there as before we did a video. So this hasn't been sent to me by either Copper State or Bovington. This is one for my own collection. So all these views, as they always are anyway, are very much my own. Now, this 3-part turret is a little bit of a moment. Everything's so good in the rest of the kit, you sort of think, right, okay, fair enough. So there's not much for it. The join's pretty good, but it's not seamless. So you've got to get it all together and sand it back, really. You've got to fill the gap and then sand it flush. It was work of a few minutes, but still, perhaps it could have been done a bit differently. Now, I did get all of this together before spraying this up in the interior white, as you can see, and check the ejector pin marks, and you can't see them. So I didn't worry about it. Here, just spraying up the inside of the engine bay in this silver colour. It's like a flat aluminium. So here we are, we've got all the bits down, and it's time to do a bit of masking, because we've got this like lower line of black. So I just kind of picked where that was and glued it up. Here is an actual problem, a fault if you like, with the kit, which is easily fixed. The floor is warped, and quite warped. So to get around that, it's super glue, pin it down one side, get that set, and then pin down the front, get that set. And it did cause a slight fit issue because of this, because it was slightly out. Really impressed with my little steering wheel there. I was going to film it, and I didn't, unfortunately. But that is the base of Tamiya XF60, and then using burnt umber and just spreading it around and trying to get brush strokes in there, and that gives you the wood grain effect. I was really happy with it, and then quite chuffed that when you open the hatch, you can see it. It's a feature of the finished model, which I thought was, well, it was worth the effort. I was really quite happy with that, and you can see it at the end. So it is worth doing that sometimes, because you're not sure what you can always see when you're doing interiors. So typical thing that I do for a white interior is get a bit of raw umber oil paints on there. Usually I'm using a lot of ammo products, but back to the oils as well. I'll be honest, if time wasn't an issue, I wouldn't use anything but oils, ammo products and enamel washes and all that sort of thing. Really, I just use as time savers. As a pre-mixed wash straight out the bottle, you can get right on with it. But I prefer oils, and I think you can do a lot more with oils. That's my personal view. Doing a little bit of hand marks there, just by the edge of the door. And getting a little bit of grime around these sort of seats that fold down. Getting a bit carried away with the project here, because you can't see any of this, ever. It was if you take the turret off, I suppose, but I don't intend to be doing a lot of that. So I've got a wash now on the floor as well, and it's ready to bring the sides together. And this is a little bit fussy, but it all goes together fine. But it is just a bit touchy. You've got to make sure it's where it wants to be, and it might mean that you've got to glue the back piece and then kind of lift it up and fold in the front bit. But once it's in, it is in, and it's where it's meant to be. So a little bit of test fitting goes a long way here. Getting that top piece in as well. It's all about just kind of getting the sort of chamfered edges to fit. Unfortunately, I didn't realise till right at the end that this piece I hadn't glued in properly. I thought it was okay, but there is actually a little raised edge on the back there, and I didn't realise that. And you can't see it here. It looks fine. It's where this paint comes out. You see that sort of white line of paint there on the glue join? That is masking the actual plate raised a little bit. So never mind. I'd have to point it out for you to see it probably. So it's not a big deal. Now, I went a bit deep on finding out if they were meant to be folded or not. The chap who actually owns Copper State was on my group when I was posting this, and he said, "Oh, don't forget to fold them." And I was thinking, right, well, I haven't seen that yet. I looked at every picture I could find on Google, and there was one from the other side showing that open, but obviously it wasn't on the bloody area where you want to look at it, and it did look like it was folded, so I cut it in half and folded it. But I'm yet to know on that. And there you go. So you can see the steering wheel through once you got that visor open. Very happy with that. Very happy. Just trying to give you an idea of what you can see in the interior if you're holding the model up and you've got a light source. So you really don't need to worry too much. Even with all of that, you can only see small areas. So unless you want to build the inside of the model as its own model and lift the turret off, you don't need to worry too much. You can't see a whole lot, and that's with all those side hatches and everything open as well. And there you can see the marks, just showing you now what you can see with the turret off. Still, it's not a huge amount of light being flooded in there, but you can see a fair bit, I suppose. So now we're getting the fenders on. Another little problem. So this hasn't been accounted for, this steering sort of arm column there in these fenders for some reason. I tried it every which way I could do it, and it just has to have been missed, because I've got to cut that much out of the fender for it to fit. And you'll see if we look at the other one where it isn't cut out, so it's got to go in quite a bit. But once that's done, it just slots straight in. It's that arm there, that linkage. And I think I'm right looking at everything. Obviously it's not on the other side, so it's not a problem. And I did double check it. You can obviously see the engine bay there as well as we're looking. And then it clips into where it's meant to be. See? So I'm pretty confident that that's something that's been missed. But it's not a big deal or a big problem. I got the spare wheel on there as well, because I thought, well, that's just going to be sprayed up green, so we might as well put it on there. And now we're starting to put on these, I guess, like wire cutters. I don't really know what they're for. It did say in the instructions. I haven't got them to hand now. Must be something like that, because it runs the wire up and then it gets hooked around that little turned end there. But they go on really nice. That's one piece there, what I just cut out. Quite remarkable moulding. Very thin at that front edge. You'll notice that there's no photo etch on this, which is refreshing. That's what I like. There's a couple pieces of clear lens for the lights, one of which I lost, which I'm not willing to remake, because I'm certain it's going to turn up as soon as I remake it. So when we get to the final pictures, there is one light that doesn't have a lens. That is why. And these bits then, these front ends, just sort of glue onto a little ledge on the piece we just glued on, and then they fit to these bits, sort of brackets on the front of the chassis as well. And then we've got this piece which has got the lamp. So this kind of comes in from the back and finds these two ledges. I've just got a bit of extra fin on that, just knowing that when it touches it will hold it, he says. Oh no, I haven't. I've done it the other way. Well, there you go. Probably would have been better to have a bit of glue on there. Now we're ready to roll into paint. So this scheme is the most complicated in the instructions, and I thought about it long and hard, and I thought this is how we go about it. We'll spray the yellow, which is a custom made yellow. It's just desert yellows and ochres and stuff. I get in there and obviously tape up what I can where I can. I dropped the model, which broke the rear facing machine gun off, which was a right pain, and that kept breaking off, but it's fine. I've just got the fenders, the rear fenders, just temporary glued on. Here you go, see, I broke that off. Nightmare. And I broke that off when I dropped it as well. But there you go. I've got to stop actually dropping models. I do it all the time. So with white tack, we're going to get little balls and just push them on in the areas which is where the yellow blobs are on the last scheme. So you just kind of try and shape them like this. Glue them. You stick them on all over the model. And then what you've essentially done is masked the yellow, ready for you to spray the green. Then we get rid of all the parts that are going to stay green, like the wheels and all of that sort of stuff. And then we start peeling them off. And it should leave you with what you can already see here. Little yellow blobs. Because essentially we're done with all of that. We don't need to spray anything anymore. When we started to peel off quite a lot, and I start to use bits of the white tack that I've got to stick into the other bits, you start to see the effect, and it starts to become clear that it's looking somewhat like the camouflage. But we're still a long way away because we've got to do the black lining, and that's what you're left with, this, which is effective in its own right. It looks better than it is when you're close up, but it's pretty good. And like I said, it's not exactly the scheme that's in the pictures or anything like that, but it is quite close, influenced by rather than referencing. So I've got a wet palette here that I've made. I'll do a link in the description below. I've made one of these on the video a few years ago. Something that like mini painters use generally, keeps the paint workable. This is from the previous evening. So you put the lid on in a little Tupperware and it still works, and it's already sort of thinned as well. And it's really just a reservoir of water on a film that separates it, if you see what I mean. So you're not putting the paint in water, it's just keeping it damp, so it works, keeps it workable. That's the idea. It's a wet palette. It is what it says. Now we do the black lining. So this is how I went for it. No messing about. Plenty of paint, thinned just how you want it, and you just paint it on. Sounds easy. It is easy. You can overthink this. You just got to smooth out all the edges. So once you've done that, you see where I've joined on that little corner, you then just got to smooth that over. And when it dries and you don't touch it, it should be very thin, just like your airbrush next to it. So it shouldn't really show up. And there we go. Now I do keep getting that problem on the corners. I go a bit too thick, and it's because I'm not bending my arm and the brush well enough. But we're starting to get into nitpicking at a level which doesn't really matter, because the overall effect is quite good. And this is where we get to. This gets us to this, and then we've got to do this sort of lining between it. The camouflage pattern sort of joins up with black lines, which I've tried on the bits that you're not going to see so much, like on the door, which is going to be open, and on the fenders, which will be sort of muddy as well. We'll just show you a close-up of what it looks like. So I didn't show you the lining because it was getting quite confusing. I couldn't have a camera in front of me, but it's exactly the same tip. You just do everything the same, but you join up instead of going around, and it gets a bit more artistic. I'm trying not to overinflate what it is. You've got to do your own artistic interpretation, which is difficult to do with a camera in your face. You really need to just take your time, which is what I've done here. And it'll always look stark and a bit odd and not quite right, and you just got to go with it, and it will all kind of line up. And this is the pattern. That's it there. But obviously we're not leaving our model like this, so it's less stark than this. Now, I get all the bits on. The fenders are a bit of a tight fit over those tyres, I will be honest. These are just the rubber tyres pushed straight on. No paint, straight on. I'm going to use them as they are. And that gives us a kind of realistic rubber look when we put the dust coat on. So we're starting with that. This is straight up old school methods here. XF57, very heavily finned and put on as a dust coat. And by that I mean just blown up from the bottom, just gently. And keeping it finned is the way to get success. But the thing you got to remember is it's acrylic. So where I'm now putting on the Ammo Kursk soil, we can use a thinner to get that. We can even take it all off, but we can certainly lessen the effect. Once the acrylic's on, that's it. You're not getting it off. You just can't. You can't use thinners. You can't do anything like that. You can't take it off. What I have gone over and done is put on a wash for dark green vehicles, and that's one of the places where this stored, because I did it when I didn't really have the time. I put it on, left it 2 or 3 days, thinking, oh, it's oils, it'll reactivate. Couldn't get it off. Started rubbing it hard to get it off back into the rivets. So this is all these raised sort of bolt heads and rivets, and started rubbing off the black painted on acrylic paint, and I thought, right, let's just put this down. And then when I was ready, I came back and I wiped it harder and got it all off where I wanted it to be, and then used the black paint to put it back on. Then did the dust coat, and we are here now. And I picked it back up. But when things like that happen, and they happen to all of us, you just got to walk away and try something else, or you got to leave it a day. Now, I left it a week and did another project and just got my head into something and put this one back till this was finished. I actually went on and finished the Churchill and then came back to this afterwards because I was quite keen to have a go with it. And I'm quite keen to take it to the Bovington show, which is on the Saturday of the week when this releases, which is why I wanted to get it done. So if you're coming down, it will be on the table. But you've just got to take a step away sometimes when models don't go quite right. It's an artistic thing, whether you like to admit it or not. It is a creative thing, shall we say then, and you can't force it all the time, and sometimes it doesn't work. So you just got to take a moment, step back, and that's what keeps it sort of fun and interesting, rather than getting, oh, the model's ruined, chuck it in a bin. There's always a way out. You should never need to get to that problem unless you melt it in brake fluid or something like that. But yeah, there's always a way around it. Right, so the Kursk soil has been put on. Very effective. With that dust coat, it now looks like dust. And that is just doing what I was doing on those fenders, all up the side, until you're happy with it. Interestingly, again, using the old school methods, on the rubber tyres, where I didn't, when it's dried, I've rubbed over it with my thumb. Which does 2 things. It gets the oils from your skin onto the rubber, which kind of gives it sheen, and it also rubs off a bit of the enamel, because it's very sort of hard friction on that. You rubbing with the rubber means the enamel is going to give. That's the thing in between. So you get this nice effect, and it starts to look, which I then get quite excited about, is the model starts to look real. The tyres start to look real. You zoom into and underneath of a mudguard with the tyre, and you think, well, that could be a picture of a real vehicle, and that's what I'm always going for, and I don't tend to get there too often, so I'm quite happy with this now as we're going forward. I always try and go for a more realistic look. That's my style, and that's where I think this is sort of heading, and using a bit of old school techniques I think is a nice way to get there as well. So this is wet mud I'm applying here. I'm not using it for the wet point, which caught me out actually, because I didn't cover all of it, and it does it dries glossy. So I'm just using this to build up the texture, because it's a heavily pigmented enamel wash, really. And when it dries, it will dry as sort of lumpy bits if you don't spread it out. It's quite a lot of pigment in there. So now I'm just kind of putting it up and under the fender and all around the edge. This isn't the colour you're going to see. This is building up the material there, if you like. So underneath this fender, it had cursed soil. Now we're going on with the, I think it's splashes or mud effects, wet mud, something like that. I'm just sort of dabbing, really. I'm putting it on and then dabbing it to fill the area, which will then leave sort of high points and low points, if you think of it like that. And then I go back along the chassis as well with this. Just to kind of, it's to give it depth. It's all about layers. So first off, we got the Tamiya dust coat, then we got the cursed soil, then we got the wet mud, then we're going to have the next one. That's 4 layers already, and then afterwards I do little washes. So this is dry step now, which is one of the best ammo products you can get, really. It's just the perfect colour. It's just absolutely right for dust. And you can see now, when we're applying that over the top, you're seeing through that the original dust coat, the cursed soil, the wet mud, and the dry step. And that is when you start to get to the point of it starting to look good. It's the layering. You can then go on and on and on and on and on with that, and it will just tend to get more and more impressive till you get to a kind of point that's too far. Adding a few splashes there as well. Very subtle, nothing like we did on the Churchill. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's the last video I've done, so check out the channel if you're new here. And this just adds more depth again. It's just another layer of effects. You can see there, it's very hard to film this portion underneath. The camera doesn't want to see it, but I think we got it there now. You saw what I was doing, and that's how it looks. And we got a picture later on of underneath the fender at the end, so you'll see how it actually comes out. And now again, just going on with the dry step. This is another heavy pigmented wash. So now I'm going under the chassis and picking up all of that, and then bringing that up the side just a little bit. And another technique, if you go too far up, like I sort of initially do, you can dry the brush off, really dry, and then go down, and you'll still get the same effect. Which is what I've just done. There you go, see? So we'll fade it down now. And then we stop getting all this, like, massive washes everywhere. You've got to let it dry, and again, with these enamel washes, it's fine to let them dry overnight. They'll still be as workable as they were before, but if you let them 2 nights, you're not going to get it off very easily. This is over a matte coat. That's half the issue as well. So it does start to bite in. So by all means, do it in an evening. Have a look in the morning. If you've got a bit of time, you can just go with a dry brush and just rub a bit off. And then you can obviously come back the following evening, and you'll be able to then manipulate it into how you want. But this effect just gives us the last kind of edge that starts to make the vehicle look, in my opinion, how I want it to look, and make it look good. It looks dusty. It looks like it's been going down dust roads in Spain without any rain, because there's no rain in Spain, and then just getting dusty up the side. So I then went on and did a few different washes with sort of starship streaking and all that sort of thing, picking out areas, just adding depth until I thought, right, I think we're there. I rubbed off the facing edge of the wheels as well, the tyres, to make it look like they're actually a little bit worn. Glued on the door, hopefully, he says. Yeah, well, it's on. And then that brings us to it, really. Turret and time for some pictures. So as usual, thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, what you think of this vehicle. A little bit different. So this is going back to stuff I used to do a lot of, and I'm going to be bringing a bit more back, but not exclusively. This is a Spanish Civil War vehicle, and that's one of my interests. I run the special interest group for IPMS for the Spanish Civil War, and we go around shows, obviously Telford and a few smaller shows locally, and this one will be on the table at Bovington on Saturday, so Saturday the 19th, that is. So if you're there, come over and say hello, and as usual, thanks for staying tuned. If you like what you see, please let me know down below in the comments, If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. I'll see you in the next video.